And we are live. Awesome.
Hello, Yang Gang Book Club.
Hi, reader friends.
Yeah, so we call them reader friends, or the peeps. We have like a crew that generally shows up to the live streams and chimes in. So we kind of wait for them to come in. But hey guys, we're here with our two authors of our book. So should we hold it up, Megan? Do you guys have it? Oh yeah, Chris has a few.
Everywhere. Take your pick. All right, this way.
I have a fancy. Is it fancy? I have actually the advanced reader's copy.
You have it on vinyl.
Oh yeah. I think it's the first time I'd ever gotten one, so I was like, feeling super special. Megan has a beautiful finished copy though. Yeah, so we have Chris who's below me, and then Jordan over there. I'm always bad at this. So you guys want to introduce yourselves first, and then we'll kind of get into some questions and stuff.
Sure. Sounds great. Well, I'll kick off. I'm Jordan. I'm the Republican in the subtitle. I grew up in Los Angeles, California. I went off to college back east, joined the Marines for 5 years as an infantry officer, and then went to law school where I got to meet Chris. And now I live in New York. I work for a philanthropy, trying to help the American middle class get better jobs, which I share a lot in common in that respect with Andrew Yang. So super excited to be here and chat with you all.
Cool.
And I'm Chris. I am the Democrat in the subtitle, and I was born, raised, and we have a special guest here. I got my dog, Alf, who just woke up. And yeah, I was born, raised, educated in Berkeley. I'm a writer by training. I was a speechwriter in the Obama administration before going to law school. So after Berkeley, I went to DC. And since graduating and meeting this guy, I guess it's the mirror thing's got me. There we go. I've moved back to the Bay Area. And I've just continued to write and speech write on the side. And yeah, I'm really happy to be here. Really excited to talk to you guys and tell you a little bit about Union and Jordan and I's weird little friendship here.
I love that. Is that how you often refer to it, as our weird little friendship?
No, that might be new. I don't know if it'll fit. Looking at Jordan's face.
Weirder and weirder, I guess. But like not in actuality, but like to people's perceptions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I guess, Megan and I can really speak for a second. So like why we picked Union. So if you haven't picked it up yet, you still have a whole week to do so. It's not very long, and it's really good. You can read it before our official book club discussion in a week. So this is Union, and then like they were saying, the subtitle says a Democrat, a Republican, and a search for common ground. That's a really cool cover. As you guys all know, Yang Gang is quite diverse politically. So we thought it'd be cool to like spend some time just thinking about, what it means to come together. You guys talk a lot about like finding common ground, but also like being friends and having mutual respect and stuff like that. So yeah, my review of the book so far, so thumbs up.
Yes.
Awesome.
4 thumbs. Wonderful.
Cool. So let's like approach it as if generally people haven't read it yet, just in case. If you guys wouldn't mind just like telling us how the book came to be, like, because you guys were friends first, right? And then started traveling together. And then you realized like this would make a really great book. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. We didn't start off intending to write a book. We met in 2015. And at that time, it didn't seem all that weird to be friends across the aisle. I had just left the Marine Corps. Chris had just left the State Department. Both of our organizations, politics was something that kind of was pushed to the side. And as long as you kind of performed the mission, it didn't matter if you were left, right, center, or whatever. And so we struck up this great early friendship. And then as 2016 got closer, we just found that all of our once great conversations kept coming back to politics. And we were always fighting about Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton and I think we were disappointed with the tenor of the conversations. And at the end of that year together, I had to be in LA for my sister's wedding, and I was going to drive. I'd never driven across the country before. And one night I just reached over to Chris, tapped him on the chest and said, "Hey, do you want to go with me?" And we found that on the road, you can just have much better, deeper conversations. This sort of noise of politics and cable news kind of fades, and the American landscape is so beautiful that it lent itself to these much better conversations. And so as we went into 2017 and then 2018, we just kept getting back on the road. And I think after our third road trip, we decided there might actually be a story here that we want to tell.
Wow, it was like 3 in.
Mm-hmm.
Holy cow!
Yeah.
Wait, but like, were they all cross country, or were they just like different road trips around?
The first one was cross country. So we left from New York and went all the way to California by way of the northern route. Jordan can tell you all the like highways and byways we went along. It was just kind of a blur of roads to me. And then the second one, we did a tour through the Southwest. Is that right, Jordan? We went south from Berkeley down through Arizona, went to Tijuana before that, all the way up, and then back around to Northern California. And the third one was a little bit more directed. That was when we sort of started to realize that we might actually be writing something. And that third one, we went from Las Vegas to Slidell, Louisiana with Pete Milan, the truck driver, this guy from Daytona Beach, Florida, big guy, tattooed arms, wearing a MAGA shirt on day one. And that was actually our attempt to get away from politics. So on our first couple of trips, we kind of dived right into the heart of politics. And we decided that we weren't going to find any sort of justification for our cross-partisan friendship by going straight to, like, say, rallies or right into like the talking points that some politicians use, others don't. And so with Pete, we were trying to get away from politics, and yet here he has this shirt on. But he turned out to be this amazing figure for us, who sort of convinced us that there was a much more complicated story about America that we could tell than, say, what you get on a cable news broadcast, or if you are scanning Twitter, say.
And at one point, we were actually, before the book, we were considering trying to create a documentary.
That's right.
We were two idiots on the road, and we were like talking about how we could do, how can we film some of this stuff? Maybe we'll use our iPhones. And then we even started writing a treatment for like a documentary to pitch. And at some point, just like looked at each other and said, "There's no way this is going to happen." And decided to write it.
Faces for books, not TV.
Exactly.
I'm glad the book. I like books. So.
Yeah, same.
If it had been a documentary, it might not have been on the Yang Gang Book Club. So
there you go.
True.
Everything works out.
Yeah. I will say too, I just wanted to say real fast, that chapter actually, I'm almost finished with the book. That chapter is still my favorite. I even tweeted about it. I love that chapter. You guys made me cry. Like, I just thought that was such a good one. So I just wanted to say that before we move on.
Thank you.
No, I agree. We should definitely like chat a little bit more about Pete once we get into that book.
Totally.
But I just wanted to ask, like, okay, so how do you go, like, if you're just, well, Chris, you're a writer, but like, how do you go about actually like having this, like, well, we're gonna try to like make this into an actual book, especially when it's such a unique concept? Like, is that a tricky thing to do, or was it actually like the first person was like, "Oh my gosh, that's like great and unique," and so how did that process work for you guys?
I wish, I really wish we had just sort of went, "Oh, we got this idea," and then suddenly, here's the book deal. No, it was trial and error the whole way forward. As Jordan said, when we first left, there was nothing. It was just a trip. By the second trip, we were like playing around with this idea of this documentary before realizing that we had no talent in that area. And by the time we decided it might be a book, we didn't know we didn't have any clue what to do. I was a speechwriter and a journalist. I knew how to pitch an article. I knew how to finish like a speech for government, but I had no idea how to write a book. So we just we kind of reported it out. We asked questions. We tried to find, the right people. And there's this system that if you can get into it, it sort of will take an idea like this and roll it forward. And it goes from one pager to proposal to draft. As nonfiction writers, we're lucky we get to pitch ideas instead of, like, here's a manuscript. I've poured my whole life into this. Tell me, what do you think? We just had to do a couple of road trips before we could say, here's an idea, tell us what you think. But yeah, I mean, it was a lot of luck. We found people who got excited early on. Some people rolled their eyes. We talked to some agents who were like, I don't see it. And others who were like, oh yeah, I can totally see it, but you guys are going to do this. And that was not at all what we wanted to do. And then finally we found someone who's like, I get it. I can see what you're trying to accomplish, and let's run with it. But it's really trial and error. And I think that's a story for most like first time authors, is you just are convinced it's going to fall apart at every step. We were like, oh, well, this is a fun experience to write a one pager together. But then you keep going and you keep going. And we got really lucky, didn't we, Jay?
Yeah, we did. And on the writing side, the writing was a lot of trial and error also. I remember we wrote an introduction, which was a much more typical kind of exposition. Like, here are the ideas. Here's what's going on in the country. This is what we're trying to accomplish. And we never actually ended up using it because that really wasn't the style that the book ended up becoming. And then we wrote our first chapter. It was actually chapter 4, Page, Arizona. And we probably spent 7-8 months on that one chapter. And initially we would each write our own sections in our own voice. So I had a section in my voice, and then it would flip to Chris's. And what we realized was it was actually very limiting because Chris would want to comment on some of the stuff I was writing about and vice versa. And so which is this kind of hybrid first person plural. We did X, we went to the rally, we saw whatever. And then when we want to talk about emotions, we'd go to third person. So Jordan felt sad, or Chris felt happy. And the whole idea there was to try to give readers kind of an insight into what we're feeling and thinking in the moment. It reads a bit as a novel in those sections. And so, yeah, we ended up developing over time this fun style. But once we found it, the rest of the book flowed pretty easily from there.
Yeah, we were really. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just gonna comment on like how I that did cross my mind of how it was an interesting style where you end up using like the we, which is not the norm.
Yeah.
Well, actually,
like, don't do that.
Oops, sorry.
Yeah, I was just saying you're usually told like don't do that, but then like in this book it makes sense because it's like you're both the voice equally.
Right. This is subtle. I don't know if you noticed it, but early in the book we always say the two of us, and it's meant to be like us together, but there's so little separation. And towards the end of the book we move to we, and it's sort of the symbolic like solidification of the union.
Yeah, no, I could definitely like catch that. That was really cool. Cool. So then you like think, okay, so we have this, and then you go through like a few different attempts, and you finally get someone. And so, how much more like traveling did you do? Like, what was that process like, and did it change the way you traveled to when you like knew you were officially writing a book?
Yeah, we did a lot more travel. I think on our fourth road trip, Jordan, we like flew to New York from one of our road trips to sell the book. So we were maybe like halfway through our road trips at that point. We were actually in Tulsa when we found out we were going to be able to write a book. And we had already done like 10,000 miles of driving, nearly maxed out a credit card or two. Like we were really like shoestringing this whole thing. And we got this call saying like, you're good to go. And I went running through the streets like a maniac, and Jordan was whooping and hollering. And it turns out there's these two guys having coffee, like literally right in front of the car. So all they saw was me busting out of the car and screaming and running up the street, and Jordan pumping his arms. And they turned out to be these two actors from the area. And they're like, what just happened? And we like told them we're writing a book. And we took a photo with them. They were like, hold on to this moment, like this is a great moment. And anyhow, so we had this great day in Tulsa where we realized we were actually going to get to write this thing. But then like this feeling sinks in where it's one of those things where you're so happy, but then you realize, oh wow, I just signed up for like 2 years of work. And after that point, you start really traveling with a mission. On the first few road trips, especially when we didn't know we were writing anything, it was very serendipitous. It was just, oh, we're close to Yellowstone. We can't miss Yellowstone. Or, I want to go, see this person in Chicago, or whatever it ends up being. But then once you know you're writing, you're like, okay, every day counts. You know, we need to find ideas that might be rich, that might express the ideas that we're really trying to get across. And so, you know, you go, okay, can we get to New Orleans in time for Jazz Fest? Can we do this? Can we, you know, you get really directed. And we ended up we were halfway through that 4th road trip. We ended up doing 2 more. And not all these road trips were made equal. The first few road trips were really like somewhat quick, you know, a week or under a week. And we did 2 that were over 5 weeks. Is that right, Jordan? We were like living on the road. And especially the last couple, we were just sort of trying to gather stories that could kind of speak to what we were trying to get across.
Cool.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I feel like you guys, like everybody wants to like go on a road trip, you know, and not just like you were saying, like that 1 week, but I feel like everybody wants to do the longer trips, and that's something that people dream of. And you guys got to do it. That's really cool.
Yeah, it can get really hard.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Sorry, Jay, what were you saying?
Oh, I was just saying we felt very lucky to get to do it, and especially to get to have a contract to like write a book about it. It's kind of like a dream come true. But yeah, Chris is right. It was also very hard. Life on the road can get wearisome day after day, and there are periods where I think Chris and I just felt like totally wiped out, and we'd have to like find little habits that we can like recover while we were on the road.
We made a pact that we'd run every day on one of these road trips, and for the first 3 days we did it. We were super proud, you know, running through the streets of like Tucson in the middle of the night, and we're like, we got this. And then like by day 4, you know, we're eating trash food, we're not moving, you know, we're just falling asleep in the motel as soon as we get in. So yeah, we by the end though, we were like focusing on like stretching when you get up and eating, you know, almonds instead of like cheeseburgers, and it can be fun but taxing.
Yeah. I mean, it's like it turned into like your job essentially. Like, did you guys get to like drop everything and just do this?
So unfortunately, no. Like we both kept our day jobs, and that was especially hard because we were still working on the road, and so we'd have to pull over in small towns to do conference calls to make sure we had service, and through long stretches in the country, there's no service at all, and so we'd often have to stay up till like 2 a.m. kind of doing the work we should have been doing during the day. So it was pretty tough. We were pulling long hours, but we kept working the whole time.
I'll never forget. Jordan took one conference call from like a diner in Osatillo, Arizona, which is in the middle of nowhere on the border. You know, it's this little like slice of Americana sort of old school diner. And here he is like on a conference call with, you know, people from New York and London and Brussels. I mean, you know, Jordan actually has a really important job. And so here he is sitting like drinking coffee with like me, him, you know, a guy in overalls and the person who runs the place in this, you know, in this middle of nowhere town. So
was there like some music blaring in the background?
Exactly.
You know, some pop music or something.
Some country music. Yeah.
I was going to say country. Yeah.
That'd be great. Like real country music. That's so cool. I have a random question. What was the best meal that you had? Or is it really hard to put it down to one?
That's a good question. We had so many good meals, but I think my favorite was we drove through northern Mexico, going in and out of border towns. And the idea was to try to understand the border region, given how prominent it is in our politics. And yet so few people have like actually seen it. We're on the Mexican side, and we stop at a truck stop. It's just like a truck stop for long-haul truckers. And we go inside, and there's this little restaurant serving like the best steak fajitas we'd ever had in our lives. And it felt so similar because we had done all these truck stops with Pete on the other side. And so all the men kind of seemed similar. And yet it was the most incredible food I've ever had.
Yeah, it was like concrete floors, concrete walls, you know, hot as heck. It was like 100 degrees inside, and the food was just amazing.
Like glass Pepsi bottles, like ice Pepsi bottles. It was amazing.
But this is our favorite topic. Like we can tell you all kinds of meals. Like
you need a Google Doc list of like, or you know, a spreadsheet, please. Thanks.
Yeah.
One of my favorites. It's a weird one, but we had just left Nashville. We got hungry, and so we're like, we just need to stop somewhere, and we pulled over. I'm not even sure where we were in Tennessee. we pulled over and there's this Jamaican food restaurant, and we went in and we just gorged, and it was amazing. Like this wasn't on any list. I couldn't find it on any like Yelp, 5 stars or anything like that. But it's just amazing, like oxtail soup or oxtail and peas and rice and like all just amazing food. And I was just blown away by how much good like roadside food there is across this country or the continent, really. Mexico, United States. We didn't eat in Canada, did we? We just sort of drove straight through the night, didn't we? Yeah. But but at least in the United States and Canada or Mexico, amazing food. No, yeah, we missed it.
I haven't had it either.
Look, I would read a whole book just about the food.
Yeah.
I would.
Jordan, am I making it up that like our editor was like, you got to cut some of these meals? Like you just keep describing so many meals. So
that's amazing.
We're talking too much about food and too much about going to bars.
Yeah. 2 of our favorite activities on the road.
Yeah, it just ends up being one of those travel guides to food and bars.
Yeah. Wow. Now that I'm thinking about it, you guys do mention a lot of bars. Like,
yeah.
Now that I'm thinking about it, you do. Like every chapter, right?
Yeah.
At least
great
one.
place to
That's
unwind,
cool. That's kind of cool, though. It's like these little tiny details within each of the chapters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Most of our experiences are bookended with a drink or two.
Sorry.
Cool. Megan, do you have a question?
I am looking at my list. Oh, here's one of the questions I had. As you guys are saying that when you first started out, you didn't know you were going to be writing about it. How do you remember? Because for me, I can't even remember what I had for breakfast like a week ago, and I eat the same thing like all the time. So.
That's a great question. So luckily, Chris, as a journalist, is always taking notes, and so we have experiences, and then Chris would every evening kind of jot down lots and lots of notes in his notebook. So that really helped. That was like sort of the basis for most of our reporting. But some of it, especially conversations between the 2 of us, often just any conversation, we'd have to kind of talk about it together, figure out like what we both remember was said and make sure our memories aligned. But with our fights, we remembered everything, like word for word. And it's kind of amazing. Even like years later, we can almost remember those fights verbatim.
Yeah.
It's like stuck in our head.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's a little crazy, but it also like makes sense because it's just when your like emotions are so heightened, I guess.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Sorry, I keep talking over you. I'm so sorry.
It always happens. It's just the nature.
It does. Yeah.
Good. Well, I was just quickly going to say that like the book like starts as memoir, right? Because we weren't writing a book, and we were actually petrified at first because like we had kind of told the guys in Page that we were like thinking about doing something, a documentary or writing, but we'd started like to tell the story to ourselves and writing it down without having talked to them yet. And then we very early on in the process we like went to them and we're like, hey, would you guys mind if we like wrote about this afternoon we spent with you guys? And they were like, yeah, absolutely, like write it all down, like say whatever you want. And we're like, thank God, whew. But it starts as memoir. Like I didn't take any notes like that night. Like I just I have notes until Horseshoe Bend, where we stopped before we met these guys at their gun range in rural Arizona. And then I have no notes until Zion the next day, except for like, maybe one. And so we had to piece it together between our 2 memories and talking to them. And we employed a fact checker because, memories can be wrong. But yeah, and so we started as memoir. And then the further we got into like the book writing process as we went, I was taking frantic notes. We were recording conversations. We had a lot more content to use.
Yeah. So, but even like even if you have good notes, right, it's still like such a task to like, now you have to tell a story. I've taken a memoir writing class. It was a while ago, but like, it's harder than you think going into it. Like I remember I wanted to take fiction and they only had nonfiction. And then you're actually tasked with like, I actually have to turn something that really happened into something that's like worthwhile to read.
Yeah.
Well, Chris he is so good at it. And I think just naturally, I think I found it really hard to remember to write all these little details. For me, it's kind of like, well, I went here, I did this, this is what happened. Chris does this amazing job of just kind of explaining the setting, these like little gestures or emotions, and that's what like gives it such color and such life. And he was excellent at that.
Thanks, buddy.
Oh.
But I gotta brag a little bit too here. Like I'm so focused on those little things, like the whole mantra of like show don't tell, like finding those ways of getting to the emotional core of a story by showing and not telling. I'll get so lost in that. Like I'll be sitting there talking to Jordan. I'll be like, I don't know what we should, like, what are we going to say about Pete? Like, how are we going to, like, this is such a complicated guy and our experiences are so varied. Like, how do we tell a story that like leads up to anything? And Jordan will be driving and I'll just be like, oh, it's about dignity. And he's got this amazing ability to just like understand experiences we've had and synthesize all these amazing ideas and like give it something, let it culminate in something, say something, like I'm so focused on the beats of a story, and Jordan is like this great way of like kind of saying, okay, this is what we want to say. And
yeah.
I think that's why we were able to get this thing done, is because we had like complementary skill sets. Like we cared about, different aspects. We cared most about different aspects of the process. And so it was good to have you, buddy.
Thanks, man. You too.
Oh.
It was like the secret sauce to making the book, but it made it very hard when it came to editing time, because it's something that Chris really loved, like a beautiful description of the mountains. He would get very upset, and when he cut my paragraphs, that I was like, oh, that was such good exposition. I would.
We have this thing we say where we knew a chapter was done when Jordan and I, instead of taking whole paragraphs or sentences out, would start to change like one word. Would like, was the mountain like flinty or was it like black gray? And if we switched it back and forth like 4 different times, we're like, I think we're done here. We got to just settle on one and move forward.
Flip a coin.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, I think you guys did such a good job. Like I felt like I was traveling parts of the country, and I haven't been to large swaths of like Middle America, like Southwest United States, and a little bit East Coast. So like, yeah, I felt like I was there, and that's definitely, I think, one of the coolest parts of the book. And then to feel like you're like traveling into some of the national parks too. Well, that was awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those books that I have a very short attention span, and which is like the worst when you also love reading. And I will just like stop in the middle of a chapter and just go do something else. But I find that with this book, I can't stop reading the chapter until I'm at the end, because I feel like we're traveling with you, and it's almost like, well, I can't just get out of the car while you're still driving, So like, so it's just this really like easy read. And I am partial to memoirs. I love memoirs because I do like it when, writers can give you that feeling that you're there. And you guys really do a fantastic job of that.
Wow. You guys are the best.
Yeah. So
do you guys do marketing? What do you guys?
Well, kind of. But I also wanted to kind of bring up, since you guys are bragging on each other, one of the things that I really loved about the book was the way you guys showed this really cool friendship between 2 men. And I feel like a lot of times in literature, we see great dynamic friendships between women all the time. And even if it's like a story about, a guy and a girl, the girl has all these friends and the guy has like one friend in the story and he just does stuff and plays basketball or something, But I think it's really cool that you guys are showing this like really tender friendship between the 2 of you that I don't think guys really get to express. What was that like for you guys?
I think it was one of our favorite parts of the book, and we actually really wanted the subtitle to be something about friendship, because we think that's the even stronger message of the book than the politics. I mean, we actually spend most of the book trying to get away from politics, saying like, this is actually dividing us. So like, let's go find the things that bring us together. And so we wanted the subtitle to be something around that, because it was the heart of the story in our minds. It was the people we met in our friendship. And so it was really fun to explore. And I think the writing of it actually helped us become even closer, because we actually had to express things through the writing that up until then we might not have. So I think Chris learned some things about me through the writing process and vice versa.
Yeah, I would entirely agree with that. I mean, and it ultimately became one of our goals, like we tried not to shy away from how hard it can be, but also like how much fun it can be. And, it's like writing out things like, I love you, man. Like I'm quick to say that with Jay now. And I, it's important for our fights in particular, to be like, you matter to me, we got angry at each other. Let's simmer down. Let's figure this out. But it's like our totem of, we want to keep trying, we want to continue this project of common ground. And we hope that like by not censoring the, like, I love you, man stuff, that we're able to like you say, like maybe inject another kind of, story into this lack of those kinds of stories, that you do see when you read a lot of these books that are out there these days.
Yeah. Like what are some of your just concerns, generally speaking, about like what, like objectively things that are maybe bringing us apart? And then on the flip side, like what are the things you feel like are great for bringing people together?
Yeah, well, I could start. In terms of like moving us apart, I would definitely point to, sadly, social media in many ways. If you don't curate it with, you guys and positive presences on Twitter and Instagram and elsewhere, like you really do get a lot of messaging that is simple and is like very narrative strong. And I don't mean that in a good way. I mean, it's giving you like a really two-dimensional sense of the country, and it drives all this like anxiety about what the other side believes and gives you this really, really tiny glimpse into it. I consider myself a journalist and a writer, and I love aspects of our media, but I also think our media environment generally is pushing a lot of, the more the negative than the positive. And, Jordan and I talked with a former like newspaper CEO recently, and he told us that bad stories outsell good stories like 8 to 1. And so if you're thinking about putting together like a newspaper, you're not going to emphasize, the common ground necessarily. So I think there's some like built-in ways in which our media, our political language, our political rhetoric at the highest levels these days is not exactly bringing people together. We found that when we got away from that, when we went to the scene, when Jordan and I actually like had a chance to talk one-on-one and in person, or we had a chance to be with Pete for like 5 days and actually like be there in person, you're far more humble and you're far more ready to like listen to another experience, because it's really hard to hate someone if you're in the same room as them or if you're in the same car as them, especially if they're behind the wheel. And yeah, so there's all these forces outside of like our smaller, more intimate relationships that I think are really pulling us apart. But Jay, what do you think?
Yeah, I think just politics itself is pushing us apart. I think Chris and I came to believe over these 3 years together on the road that politics is both extremely important. It's like the way we advance the values and causes that we care the most about. It's so important to creating a better society, and yet politics is like devoid of all the beautiful things that like bring us together and make life wonderful. And I think what we've seen over the last, like certainly the last couple of years, but it's a long-term trend, is that as like more and more things that could intermediate politics, like community, friendship, institutions that like bring us together, as those seem to be fragmenting, that politics is invading everything. It becomes all we do, all we talk about, and politics is inherently divisive. It's meant to be a fight. Like it's a binary. You're on my side or you're not. And so as it becomes like it dominates life, it just keeps driving us further and further apart. And I think there's a lot of reasons for the fragmentation, as Chris was describing. But in the end, like we need things to intermediate politics. Like we need friendship. So it mattered that every time we talked about politics, the friendship always came first. And Chris and I would see it through the lens of like, okay, I care about this issue, but I care even more about this friendship. And so let's find a way to be able to talk about it together. And I think the sort of fragmentation of community has been the biggest issue I've seen. And we saw it all the time on the road, that people were really hungry for community. And the beautiful thing about the world we live in today is like you can find it in new places, and you can do it over distributed geographies. And I think what you all are doing is the perfect example of this. But we have to go through this process of like building it all back up so that it becomes like a bigger and bigger part of our lives. I think once that happens, politics will stop dominating to the extent it is today.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a light bulb right there. Like,
Yeah.
if we just like all go to the YMCA a little bit more often, or like,
Goes a long way.
Yeah, but then of course it's just not entirely possible right now. So
yeah, that's right. And then on the things that I think bring people together, we write about this a lot in the New Orleans chapter, but we really feel that music has a special power. There's something incredible about music that like allows everybody to tap into it, to experience something transcendent, and to feel emotions that allow them to connect with other people and come together. And that's true for art generally. Like art allows for nuance and complexity, and you could bring any perspective to it, and it's okay. Whereas like politics is so dualistic. It's like either you're on this side or that side, but art can transcend that. And I think that's where Chris and I are very hopeful that like anything that comes after this current moment will be transmitted through art and culture and music.
Yeah, the Renaissance, the new Renaissance.
Yeah, we have this term because Andrew Yang was for UBI, and so we're all about that. So we have this term called like a UBI Renaissance, which if you weren't into UBI, you could probably like transfer it to some other ideas, but it is the idea of this hope for the future, that we can build a future in some way that is, people are thriving, and we are together and unified and not struggling,
Yeah.
which we are now, and what's going to come out of that, like what art and like what new ideas and cool architecture and stuff, like all the cool things. So, we agree for sure. Do you actually want to, I kind of said we'd take questions at the end, but I think we might have had a couple, which Susan was asking about dealing with some struggles with family, like not getting along, and argumentation situation. So yeah, I don't know, like you guys don't really go into your own family situations in the book, so I don't know, like, is that something that you've had to deal with on like a personal level of like having to come together and do what you guys have done, but with people other than yourselves?
Well, yeah, we absolutely. I mean, I think that some of the lessons that we learned between the two of us are hopefully applicable, elsewhere. One quick one is we learned pretty early on to try to have difficult conversations in the sort of most intimate setting you can find. So like if you are having a political conversation in front of an audience, there's this natural inclination to turn it into a debate where someone wins and someone loses. If you're able to do it around, say, like a dinner table instead, or, in the cab of Pete's car or truck, excuse me, or the two of us, as the sun's setting or something along those lines, the situation you find yourself in really speaks to how that conversation is going to go. And the more intimate, that means the more vulnerable you can be. That means the more risk you can take, the more willing you are to give someone rope, to say, well, I hear this, but is that what you're really trying to get across? There's also this natural inclination to try to find common ground, to try to find the sort of human threads that hold us all together. I think it's only natural to say, we're in this together, whether it's we're breaking bread or we're going somewhere together, where you say, okay, who are you? We need to have teamwork here. We need to be on the same page. So let's understand one another instead of fight. So, that's hopefully a lesson that not worked for us and can hopefully work elsewhere. I mean, it certainly worked in our conversations with Pete, or Mimi, when people who come from very different perspectives, than ours and very different life experiences. The other is to commit to a much longer process than, say, one conversation. Jordan and I learned really early on that we were never going to change each other's minds in one conversation or two or three. We're still working on each other. Still working on making Jay a Democrat. But and it has not worked yet. But like committing to that sort of long-term messy project where you're not going to necessarily move someone in an appreciable way, but committing to the long-term process instead of saying like, I have to get to this end point tonight, or tomorrow, or by the end of Thanksgiving break, or something along those lines. Jay, what am I missing? I know we got a few more.
I think we kind of described what Chris just said as like the longer term strategies for how you can have better conversations. And then some of the tactics like in the conversation itself, I think the ones that I find most important are it's really just recognizing in political conversations that we're often, we think we're talking logic, we think we're like just giving our perspective or sharing facts. But in fact, like they're always emotion laden. There's always like an emotional layer to the conversation. And that's where conversations get out of control because you feel very passionately, you feel like the other person's not hearing you, start to get frustrated that like they can't understand simple points. And all that's because like there's so much emotion behind these things. And without recognizing it, it can really lead to like conflict that you don't really want because the other person is someone you care about. And so just being aware of the emotion, trying to sense it in the other person and feel like, okay, there's clearly something a little deeper. Why don't I ask about that emotion or ask about the experiences underneath it? And that allows for a much better conversation because you're being sensitive to like how your words can land on someone and where they're coming from in the conversation. So I think that's first. And then second, I think Chris and I found that if we could talk about shared values and identities that lead to those values, we would have much better conversations than if we tried to talk about policy issues and sort of Republican positions versus Democrat positions. So if I could speak as a Marine and Chris as a journalist, or me as like someone of Jewish faith and Chris as someone who's agnostic, like we could have a much better conversation than if like Chris is seeing the perspective as a Republican defending the party and vice versa. And the same on issue after issue, we talk about like, well, what are the values behind voter ID laws versus like why are Republicans supporting this? It becomes a much richer conversation because we find that we often share values. We just have a very different sense of priority or means to get to those values. And so that led to better conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it also allows you to like acknowledge someone's humanity and like kind of back to your point about how the media is like the narratives are so inserted in our minds and our like entire worlds now that it can just be this filter that you didn't know was there, I feel sometimes. And a lot of that narrative is, like you were saying, it's built on vilifying or, beating or calling them wrong, you right. It's like built on that dichotomy. And so, yeah, I feel like you just don't want to get pushed to that point, like so far to where you're starting to like disrespect someone or see them as kind of less human because they have these views and like that's inhumane or that's I don't know, just super illogical or there's different approaches. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And I think one more thing I'd add is it's counterintuitive, but you can actually be much more persuasive to someone in an argument or in a conversation if you acknowledge some of their side and grant them that some of their points are actually really valid. When you say like, Chris, that thing you said, I actually totally agree. And I think you have such a good point there. It opens Chris up to what I have to say next. Whereas if I just come in and say like, well, actually you're missing, this, and this, then Chris's reaction is going to be to hunker down and to try to prove to me why I'm wrong. Mm-hmm. And so by acknowledging the virtue in the other side, you're actually much more likely to persuade them of yours. And so, it's hard. It takes like some grace to acknowledge someone's point of view that you might disagree with 99%. But if you could find the 1% you do agree, it actually expands the conversation a lot.
Definitely.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I'll say too, like one of the things I've noticed just in my own, like, I guess anecdotally, is that I wasn't into politics very much. I kind of got out of it because I was like, I don't like this. This is awful. And then of course, when Yang started running, I was like, oh, actually, this seems like a form of politics that I could do. And then I noticed myself just like coming to every conversation being like, I have to be right. I have to be right. And it's like, as soon as I let that go of like coming into the conversation, not being like, I have to be right about this. And instead being, I guess, humble and saying, I don't know everything about everything and I don't have to. And just because I feel like I have to be right, even if I'm not right, that doesn't mean I'm stupid or that you're stupid. It just means we have different ideas about things. And I think that conversations flow a lot easier when you kind of take the right and wrong out of it and just listen to understand and not listen to argue.
Totally. I think that's, yeah, you've nailed another one of the things that we found on the road, which is, when we come to a conversation to listen, we learn so much. If you surround yourself by people who think exactly like you do, the world feels very small, and it feels very small in a comfortable way. But when you surround yourself with people who look at the world very differently, or bring different evidence to the table, or different arguments, or different first principles, or philosophers, or whatever it ends up being, then the world looks huge. And that can be unsettling, but it's also so important for really understanding what you believe and bettering your arguments and bettering your understanding of the world that we live in. So in some ways, like, I like to say that Jordan made me a much better liberal, in that he took my arguments and said, okay, I see this, I see that, but what about this? And, what about this fact? And have you considered this piece of history? Have you considered this, policy idea? And basically it doesn't necessarily move me to say, okay, now I'm a conservative, but it does make you go, I hadn't thought about that. And now I need to understand that if I'm going to actually make this argument, and how do I process it? And how do I come to the other side? And I hope I've, maybe made Jordan a better conservative, as kind of along the ways that he made me a better liberal. But it's exactly to your point about being humble and coming to a conversation to learn instead of to win. We were at our worst when we were trying to win.
Yeah, I think, the book shows just how incredibly possible that is. That, like, to me, like, the frustrating thing is like, this could be happening on such a bigger scale. Like, not in, like, it's a small scale at the same time. It's about just having these small conversations. But if more and more people were doing it, and it would just make such a big difference. And so it's like, it's kind of frustrating to me how it's like, in a way, it's like so simple, and right. Like, you see the issues as someone, because I come from like a conservative background, but then moved more like liberal as I, like in college and stuff. So, see, I hear both sides. I hear like Fox News pundits and I hear CNN pundits, and I'm like, I get what you're saying most of the time,
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, for some reason, there's just this cement wall, or there's this big barrier in between, and it's just honestly kind of frustrating to me.
Can I also add, like, Jordan and I are well aware that if you look at us, we look a little different, but we're also two white guys. We both went to the same law school. We both are from California. We dedicated it to our two moms. Like, we have big mom influence on our lives. Like, there's so many ways in which we are very, very similar, and we kind of isolated this politics variable. And we were testing this very, very particular variable, and it nearly blew us apart like a million times. And so, like, just finding that out, that like politics is so hard to do this with, even if you like share all of these other, first principles. We hope that this is like a kernel of hope that A, that's so hard, learn that and know that this is not easy. But then B, like, if, we found this kernel of hope, we were able to do this. And so maybe in other contexts, our experience will help inform others, but it is a kernel, it was our experience. We wanted to be messy. We wanted to show the whole process, but we also didn't want to run away from the fact that, this was our experience, and it's a very particular one.
Yeah, definitely. So we're coming up on an hour, so we don't want to like take up too much of your time, but we did want to like kind of get into like a few elements of the book, without any like, I guess, spoilers, though I don't know if there's spoilers yet, but and we've brought up Pete like a few times, so I just like would love to just hear you in your own words, maybe talk about that. We had a good question.
Yeah, someone wants to know if you guys know what coolant does now.
It's fine. We got that question just a couple days ago. Now we actually do, or at least we were told. I don't know if I could repeat it. But up until a couple days ago, I had no idea. I would still give him the same snarky answer that I gave him in the. Jordan, you know, right? Did you know beforehand?
I think we assumed that it cooled the engine down. And it turns out that actually it's called coolant in the South, where it's hotter, and antifreeze in the North, where it's cold, where it's colder, because it can actually keep the engine cool, or it can keep it warmer, depending on. It basically tries to equilibrate the engine. But we learned that 2 days ago.
Yeah. And here's a lesson in listening. Jordan listened, and now he has an answer to the question like that, and it just went totally over my head.
I only know because my dad's like, I call him Mr. Fix-It. He can fix anything. And he's like, well, you can just, I was like, oh, I have to go get coolant. And he's like, well, you can just put water in it. You live in Santa Barbara. Like, the water is cool. You don't need to worry about it freezing. And I was like, oh, okay, cool.
That would terrify me.
Hack.
Yeah.
So, for anyone on the comments, I didn't know what coolant or antifreeze was.
The more you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, so yeah, Pete, like, why did you want to do that? How did you find out about Pete and like get connected with him, and like just for anyone who like hasn't read the book, and just like give us a little like taste of your book and like what it is that the story you tried to tell with him.
Absolutely. So Pete, we did a ride along with Pete in the winter of 2017 after our first 2 road trips. So we were deep into it at this point, and we were getting a little bit more directed, and we really wanted to kind of go tell stories, American stories that maybe Jordan and I weren't sort of, well versed in. We wanted to go, meet people who could give us a different perspective on the country. And I'm a big Studs Terkel fan, who wrote Working. In fact, I have it somewhere up here, but I won't go grab it. And Studs Terkel spent years like interviewing people about their work. And he created this like really soulful, amazing book about the meaning of work and how it's different across different vocations. And one of my favorites was always this interview of a truck driver in the mid-century, driving for a particular company. I think he was trying to unionize, and the whole conversation is about the difficulty of the road and also the sort of nobility of this like community that kind of comes together and supports their own, even though it's such an individual kind of cowboy profession. And so Jordan, I told Jordan, I was like, we should go spend some time with a truck driver. I mean, truck drivers are the ultimate road trippers as well. I mean, Pete, it turns out, had done 3 million miles on the road by the time we met him. But we didn't know how to meet a guy like Pete. And so it turned out that there was a book that came out called The Long Haul by this great guy named Finn Murphy. And we just hit him up on Facebook, and we're like, hey, are you still driving? Do you want to take us out to like on a ride along? And he never met us. He had no clue who we were. And he said, well, maybe you give me a call and we talk about it. And we called him, and he like kind of vetted us. And he said, well, I'm writing this book. I'm not really on the road anymore. But let me find you someone. And he sent us a few names. We made some calls. And by the time we found Pete, by the time we got on the phone with Pete, it was obvious that he was our guy. We called him, and he gets this blaring like country music ringback tone. So when you're expecting like the ringer, it's just Kenny Chesney or something like that, just jamming. And then he answers, and you just hear like wind. It's like he's like talking out the window or something like that. And then his booming voice over all of it, like. And we started asking him these questions, and he had these great, like bombastic, like long, amazing answers. I think Jordan's really fond of the fact that at one point he just kind of stops and he goes, guys, like all the typewriters in the world couldn't capture all of my thoughts to tell you guys, or something along those lines. And we're like, this is our guy. And so we decided to go meet him. And he said, look, it's hard for me to know where I'll be when, but we pinned him down in Las Vegas and finished our law school finals probably a little too early based on my grades, and flew out to Las Vegas as quickly as we could and met him there and got out on the road with him. And he just picked us up and we went. And as you guys know from reading the book, and I won't give anything away, but we got in the truck with him, and it can be awkward at first when you're first getting to know someone in that kind of context, 2 randos in a car in a truck with a guy who usually is alone or with a helper. And we say, so how do you know Finn, to try to break the ice? And he goes, who? And we're like, Finn Murphy, the guy who set us all up. And he goes, I've never met the man. And it turns out that Finn had contacted a dispatcher who had sent out this all call, and Pete had just been the guy being like, oh, I'll take him. And so we had this one call with him, and otherwise we had no sense of who this man was. Wow. Which was a little disconcerting. But the more we got to know Pete, the more we just found him to be this like amazing, complex, soulful, self-educated, kind of brilliant in his own right man. And we had these amazing conversations with him. Jordan, does that capture Pete?
Yeah, I think that pretty much captures it. I think what Pete comes to represent in the book is just this thing that we believe, which is everybody is way more complex than we give them credit for. And it's so easy to simplify and to kind of create a caricature of what someone on the other side might believe. Pete had a Make America Great Again shirt. When we met him, he wore it for like almost the whole trip. And it turns out that like whatever you would assume about him based on that shirt turned out not to be true. And so in the book, he's conveying the fact that everybody's more complex and we should have humility about the other side and what they believe. And Pete is just such a wonderful human. I think he represents just this deep goodness, but also this like endless effort to try to be better. Like Pete really, he had struggles early in life, and he's just always trying to be better and treat people right, do well by those he serves, whether his family, friends, community. He's just a good person, and we think the role he plays in the book is just conveying that sense of goodness and humility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's that moment where he says, he's about Trump, but he's like, I don't like how he doesn't come around on climate change. And, it's just like one of those things, it just like strikes you. You're like, oh, like,
yeah,
okay, it's a little detail, but it like makes a big difference, I guess. And
the irony of that statement while he's driving this diesel engine truck down the highway at the same time. Yeah. Super complex.
Yeah. Right. But I mean, it's his life. Like, it's his lifeline. Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. On that note, I mean, I think the other thing Pete represents in the book is this search for dignity. We came to believe that everybody in America, like what matters to them is having a sense of dignity in their lives. And so much of the anger and frustration in the country today, I think, comes from the sense that there's lots of communities that just don't feel like they have dignity today. And the UBI movement is one answer to this. Like, how do people have a greater sense of agency and control over their lives and kind of a floor so that they can have meaningful choice? But we saw this over and over again in various ways that there's this dignity deficit in the country that people feel. And Pete articulated that when he talked about the American dream and what he wanted and how insecure he felt when it comes to providing for his family. And so this idea of dignity, I think, is very powerful.
I really like the dignity deficit. If I'm ever talking to a Republican, they're like, but the deficit. Can I say, what about the dignity?
I like that.
Is that a good rebuttal? Because it is, but I'm like being serious to the effect that like, I think that is something that's like common ground topic, right? Like, yeah, we all want human dignity. We just like have different ways of going about how we think to help more people have dignity. But yeah, definitely, I agree with you there.
And we were just amazed by how often we heard like similar stories like echoed across this country, whether it was dignity or the importance of second chances and redemption, and that everyone deserves a second chance, whether it's, justice, equality, opportunity. I mean, we all sort of want the same kind of basket of value goods, and we articulate it slightly differently. But it's amazing the parallels between what we all are sort of envisioning in the future. Maybe not all, but like many people across this country are just sort of desirous of very similar things, and that's where like Jordan and I found hope. I mean, because that's a lot of consensus, and we might not be able to find it right now in the media or in our politics, but it's out there. And if it's out there and it still lives on, then we have a chance of tapping into it. And so I think that's really the story the torch we're really going to bear going forward is saying, look, we're not that far apart, even though we might look like it.
Yeah, that's definitely like, important when everyone's just talking about how divided we are. Having something to show for like to contest that, I think is really valuable. Cool. I have one more question, I guess. I was just wondering, like, was there anything that didn't make the final cut? Like, was there any stories that you wanted to include that didn't make the final book?
Yeah, so there's a lot that didn't make the final book. Our first draft, I think, was like 250,000 words or something, and the final draft was 80,000. So it was a very painful process. Darlings, a lot didn't make. But Chris, what what stories in particular didn't make the cut?
Well, we wrote about every road trip. There was some thought that we might like cut Mexico. You know, we wrote this whole chapter and we spent like 6 days in Mexico and we almost cut it. But we like fought for it. We put our, sharp elbows on and we kept it. But there's definitely like anecdotes that we didn't get a chance to include. Like a few from that trip, one where we kind of, that whole chapter is a little bit about how we're fearful of things that we don't really know and we don't really fully understand. And, we're driving across these Mexican highways that we had been told, this could be cartel routes and you never know. It's dangerous. You should stay on this side of the border. And we get stopped. Traffic just kind of comes to a halt in this kind of remote mountain region. And we were petrified because we didn't know what was happening. And, it turns out to just be like, normal just reconstruction of a road. And in fact, like those roads in Mexico were some of the best roads we drove across in all 20,000 miles, just FYI. Thank you, Mexico. But like, and it was just this example of like, if you don't, we can get these like boogeymen in our minds of fear and what something means. And if you don't actually go there and experience it yourself, you can kind of harbor those going forward. So, I mean, that's just like one little one that didn't make the cut, but we tried to get the sort of the big beats of our trips in there. But Jordan, I feel like I'm missing something obvious, and you're just gonna like hit me with it, and I'm gonna be like,
no, I think you said it. We cut a lot of conversations that Chris. That's right. I think we had a whole section on podcasts. Because like, so much of our time on the road.
The book would have been so much more Yang Gang. You already had truckers.
Yeah. We have so many.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, that was actually one of my comments was going into the book. I did think it was going to be like conversation after conversation, and I liked that it turned into like having this big, like wider scope of a visual. And then it was also a lot of it was conversations with other people that weren't YouTube, So was that like a intentional thing from like the very get-go, or did it was it a process in realizing like this is the direction we need to go?
I think initially, actually, our bias was to hide ourselves. So we kind of tried to fade and to bring the people we met to the fore. And really show them. And our editor had to keep pushing us to bring ourselves more to the story. So it actually felt very unnatural for us to put ourselves into it.
Yeah, and we also just found that like the people on the road were far more interesting and articulate and had better things to say than Jordan and I ever could. So it became kind of natural to just be like, well, why wouldn't we continue to just hear Pete talk? And so like, of course, like a book needs an arc. It needs it. We sort of anchor it for lack of a better term. And, but really like our big messages come through in the voices of the people we meet, because they were really the ones who sort of directed us towards this message of hope and this message of common ground. And our conversations are just sort of secondary to that in many ways.
Yeah. I think it made the book so much stronger though, just to have a diverse cast of voices and characters.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Megan, do you have another question? We have one more in the chat.
I'll just bring up that one. Cool. You guys pretty much answered all mine. So she wants to know what the kindest act you saw on the road.
Oh, that's a great question.
Susan with the good questions.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm unprepared for that. Jordan, unless you have one, I can start riffing.
Go for it.
I remember, so Mimi Tarasik is a woman who runs a drug diversion program, a prison diversion program in Tulsa, who's like really core to this book. She helps women, especially mothers who are caught up in the criminal justice system, like break the cycle, the downward cycle of prison. And she offers them wraparound services, helps them sort of get back on their feet and hopefully get away from both drugs and the criminal justice system. And she's a busy woman. She's got a lot, like within the first, it was like a movie, within the first 10 minutes of being with her, like walking through her program, she like picks up the phone and she's like, it's the AG, I gotta take this, and so she's like got much more important things to deal with than us. But but she just like invited us in and, you know, let us see answered all of our questions, you know, like invited us over to her house, you know, for dinner, would just spend as much time as we needed, because she just was excited by our project, and she was just like, whatever you need. And just to open up her entire life like that to two total strangers was just so generous. And I often was like blown away. I was kind of like, why do you trust us so much? And I think there's this generous spirit around this country. And again, it's not everyone, and it's not, you know, it's not necessarily extended equally, which is a problem. But we were over and over again, and it's not just Mimi, you know, it's people of all different shapes, sizes, colors, backgrounds. But Mimi really like kind of captured that for me. Yeah.
It's not about a single act. It's like about someone's like being.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I have a fun one. I echo Chris that over and over again, we saw generosity on the road, and people welcomed us in and did stuff for their community that just spoke to this deep generosity. But the fun one is the end of the book. We go back to Idaho to find the state trooper who had pulled us over 3 years earlier, and he didn't give us a ticket, so we didn't actually know his name. We couldn't even really remember where we were in the state. We had like vague, fuzzy memories about it, and we thought it might be around Idaho Falls. So we go to Idaho Falls. We stroll into the police station, the sheriff's station. There was like the Idaho Falls police and then the sheriff's. And Chris like strolls up to the guy at the desk and says like, "Hello, sir. We got pulled over 3 years ago by a state trooper, and he was so nice to us. We're trying to come find him again. Can you help us?" And the guy says to Chris, "Well, do you know his name?" And Chris is like, "No, we didn't get his name." And the guy's like, "Well, did you get a ticket?" And Chris is like, "No, he let us go." And the guy's like, "Well, do you remember where it was?" And Chris was like, "No, we can't quite remember." And the guy with the deadpan face goes, "I have no idea who that could be." But then his like deadpan broke, and he goes, "Gosh, I really wonder who that was." And he was like, "I can help you over there." And so we go over to another window, and like 20 minutes later, it felt like 5 different people were all like flipping through files on the phone, calling all these different sheriff stations, trying to help us find this state trooper. And eventually we found him. And these 2 women who were the ones who found him kept checking in with us. They wanted to know if he was the right guy. And it was just this amazing generosity to 2 idiots who like showed up looking for this guy who didn't know his name. And it was amazing to see all these people like jump in to help us.
Shout out Aaron and Carly. Thanks again.
Rock stars. Yeah, I guess that is kind of the obvious answer, though, is, you know, like that was like a group effort, act of kindness of this. Just, yeah, I love that part. Just like this, like very like simple, random, like kind of seemingly pointless thing that like everyone was just like, we have to find this person.
Yeah. It was like a Friday afternoon, you know, like everyone wanted to go home, and instead, you know, everyone just helped us with this crazy kind of stupid plant. And it was so powerful to us.
Yeah. So yeah, and then that really ended up being the point of the story, it seemed like, you know, as opposed to like, let's put this whole conversation. Did you end up having that conversation?
We did, yes. Yeah. We well, I guess the spoiler, we're past the spoiler alert, but yeah, we did manage to find him. And we had a call, which is not actually in the book. So here's some behind the scenes stuff. We had a call with him the next day. And, you know, he remembered, eventually it came out that he remembered us. And he said something that really stuck with Jordan and I, which was, look, you know, most people meet me on their worst day. You know, they've either done something wrong, or, you know, I'm pulling people over, you know, they're about to get a ticket, or, you know, something bad is happening in their life. Right. You know, they don't like seeing me. And he says, despite that, I think that something like 98% of people are like genuinely good. And of course, this is like one man's opinion, you know, one man in Idaho's opinion, but, you know, it is true. Like here's a guy who sees people probably on their worst day, and he still feels that way. And I know, you know, it's a complicated thing. Policing in America is extremely complicated. And it is really, really front and center right now. But we just found that to be such a powerful statement we don't know a whole lot about this guy other than, this one day we met him and then this phone call. But it was profound to like end these trips on that note, for both of us, all three of us, hopefully.
Are you gonna write the sequel and then start it with the conversation?
That's a great idea. You're hired. You're our editor.
I'll edit that one section.
Just the one.
Just like back up the conversation. Oh yeah, you need a comment. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for your time. I have one more question. Unless Megan, are you dying to ask a question? Because I have kind of one other random question along the lines of basically the food question. Is that I was like, oh yeah, we would be remiss if we didn't ask you. I think 2 parts, I guess. If you could recommend one city or like national park or something to visit, what would it be? And favorite road trip song?
Ooh,
wow.
So favorite city, New Orleans. New Orleans is such an incredible place. It's different than any other country or any other city in America. Favorite road trip song, anything by Leon Bridges, basically. But Texas Sun is currently my favorite. And what was the other question?
No, that was it.
That's it. Yeah.
I said I'm just saying either like city or national park. So if you want to do both, go
So
for it.
national park, the Badlands. The Badlands are incredible.
Damn it, Jay. He took everything.
So I guess that makes sense that you both wanted to take the Badlands. So unanimous Badlands. I haven't been. I've been to like a lot of national parks on the West Coast because I like grew up in California. So
yeah,
cool. Yeah, Chris, what's yours? You gotta pick one.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I would choose Detroit. I actually really love Detroit.
Cool.
I think it's a fascinating city, kind of on the rise. It's been through a lot, and there's this really wonderful sort of perspective on the world, and this like youthful and creative culture there. And we like ate like kings, and amazing like music scene and art scene. It's just a great place. Although I would have said New Orleans as well. I love New Orleans. And then for a national park, Yellowstone just blew me away. The diversity of that place, and like we only drove through it, and we ended up seeing buffalo, wolves, a bear, elk. We just got super lucky, and so I think there's it's always gonna have a special place in my heart. And then favorite road trip song. Oh man, the first song that came to mind was "Sweet Jane" by Lou Reed, because it's like in our New Orleans chapter, and whenever I hear it, I think about Union, and and I think about New Orleans.
Well, you could make like a Spotify playlist for Union. Or did you already do that?
Good.
It would pretty much just be like a Leon Bridges CD, like an album, because we were kind of became his groupies for a minute.
I think we're all old enough where like. Yeah, we all gotta be old enough to, because me and Megan are the same age. Because like before like smartphones and stuff, like if you went on a drive, like you would put a CD in,
right,
and listen to an album. So it's like that feels classic road trip to me.
Yeah. After you downloaded them all illegally and then burned them illegally onto the CD. That's the least.
Yeah.
I bet Jordan did do that.
No, I definitely did that, and had those CDs in it for like a decade. So it's fun to like go back into the car, turn on the CD player, and be like, "Oh, I was listening to that song."
Yeah,
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to agree with you guys about New Orleans, by the way. I lived there for a year, and
oh wow.
I'm gonna be honest, I like going back and visiting it more than I liked living there. But it is really cool. I always tell people you need to go at least once, but you need to find a local to show you around, and not do the touristy stuff. Do the touristy stuff, but it's not as fun.
Agreed.
Okay. Yeah, you guys should go on some like travel podcasts too to promote your book.
Yeah.
Not just book
Good idea.
Travel podcasts. Yeah.
Let's do it, Jay.
Do it and then let us know, and we'll listen and tweet about it. Okay, cool.
We'll
so let's check in. We have a couple people saying, Susan, thank you for your great questions. Oh, no, Megan's doing it. Okay, sorry.
My bad. I'm just trying to throw this one up there.
Yeah.
Alpha wanted to say goodbye. He showed up
Yeah.
to say goodbye.
Oh, yeah. Oh, we're a friend. Wait, is he gonna go any road trips with you?
I don't know how he'd do. Maybe. He's a little bit of a prima donna.
Oh,
Cool.
all right.
Thank you so much.
Do we have any housekeeping, Kateri?
Well, we're gonna be back in a week, so we can just
That's true.
go.
Yeah.
So.
Stay tuned this week for some exciting content on the Twitter page. Got some exciting content.
Featuring these
I
people.
don't know where you're pointing.
I'm putting down.
Yeah.
But then they kind of went this way.
And Jordan.
Diagonal.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's a circle.
Potentially something to do happening on Tuesday. Yeah, we're excited for it. So yeah, so thanks for, and like, I guess like shout out to like Vanessa, and like she's awesome, and like this is also like super OG YGBC Yang Gang Book Club, because yeah, like you guys, like Vanessa was one of the first people to reach out to us and say like, hey, I think you love this book, and this whole thing has just been a long time in the making too, because your book was published date was pushed back for COVID, and so yeah, just honor this. We're here. Yeah.
Shout out to Vanessa, our editor.
Shout out to Vanessa for that. Thank you guys for being here, and this isn't it. We'll see you guys like a little bit next week. So everyone in the chat, stay tuned for some cool stuff. Cool.
Thank you so much. This has been so much fun.
Yeah, thank you both so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, guys. Bye.
See you later, guys. We're gonna end the